Welcome to episode 1 of my coding vlog. I decided, since I'm learning how to code, that maybe making a vlog or something like this will help to explain what the experience is like trying to learn to code on your own. I've seen a lot of videos that are out there about someone giving like a 20-minute presentation or maybe a 30-minute presentation talking about their experience, but they don't really have boots on the ground explanations of, well, what do you do from like day one and onward. You have to know, like, okay, what's the path to go along? And so at the very least, what I'm doing is I'm following HTML and CSS tutorials that are provided on YouTube by Free Code Camp. They're very popular on YouTube. There's an 11-hour tutorial that's a full HTML and CSS course, which I have been pretty much finishing up over the last week. Took a couple of detours with Flexbox and with CSS grids as well, but I'll get to that when I get projects with that. The main important thing is to understand the fundamentals before you try and do anything that looks really fancy. Because I've been given extremely bad advice throughout my entire life, and part of the really bad advice that comes around with writing, and not with writing, I'm also into writing and I'm working on books at the same time, and I've been ranting a lot about writing. When it comes to writing code, I should say, there's a lot of bad advice about, oh, just try and play around with it and then you'll figure things out. It's like, well, you need to know what you are able to do, what the different functions, not just functions, but what the different things in the program do. Functions, elements, selectors, and event listeners, all of these things. You have to understand how they interact, and that starts with doing very basic things. Yes, it's not going to be pretty. You're not going to be able to build a resume in the first week. So the crappy advice is, oh, just play around with it and you're going to figure things out. It's like, I've wasted a lot of time just playing around and trying to figure something out. Really, really, really simple example. CSS grids, CSS Flexbox, for one thing, is usually managing things on a line. It's hard to make a table or a two-dimensional page layout with Flexbox. You can, and if you're trying to make a layout with Flexbox, you shouldn't, because that's not what it's for. I don't have any mentor over my shoulder saying, what the fuck are you doing this for? Just move on to Flexbox. It's like, well, I'm trying to play around and become familiar with it. A proper mentor in that situation would be like, no, don't around trying to do stuff that the program's not meant for. That's not the specific thing. That's not the focus. You're not going to use that in a real world environment.
But because I'm a novice and because I'm learning on my own, because I don't have experience with other things more broadly,
it takes several painful hours of going, why can't I make this? Why can't I arrange these elements on the page the way I want to using Flexbox? Why does it keep reverting back to basically a linear format? So, because Flexbox aligns things. It doesn't set them up on the page. If it sounds like I'm speaking gibberish, I apologize. I don't mean to like get ahead of myself, but part of this is just getting stuff off my chest. It is very stressful. I have lost sleep over this. Life situations and everything, all the drama involved with that, being significantly isolated and having no place in the world. So I need something to vent to counterbalance that to a degree. Okay, so on the ground, what am I actually doing to learn? Okay, we have the tutorials that I'm following with CSS and HTML from Free Code Camp. Okay, so what did I do yesterday? That's what a lot of these vlogs are going to come down to, is what did I actually do? What did I actually make? And what did I learn? Okay, so I'm going to be like recording these things as kind of like a warm-up to get my brain back into the coding situation, like in the morning or something like that. So I review what I did the previous day. And so I'm not going to go over like the basics. An H1 tag makes you have big letters like this. No, okay, I'm getting more towards like projects and ideas here. I've been stuck in tutorial hell for over a year, and it sucks. So the projects yesterday were focusing on CSS transition, translation, and rotation. So these are basically like PowerPoint animations. If you ever played around with PowerPoint and you have things sliding around on the screen, there's ways to not hard code this. There's ways to use event listeners or click buttons to make things move around on your computer. The first mini project that I did this morning was I had a setup of several border lines. So I had border boxes where I was messing around with the before and after pseudo selectors to make multiple border boxes. You could just add other divs to control those border boxes, but I thought I was just going along with expanding on something. So here's something where you have a viable range of a playground for ideas and concepts that you can expand on. If you're following a tutorial, then do something a little bit beyond what the tutorial is doing. Like use what's going on in the tutorial, but then make it expand it a little more. So my example here is the tutorial guy for the CSS doing the before and after pseudo selectors. It makes a borderline, like a shadow to the box, and he only has it in one direction. He only has one set of this. So I made two nests and I made a bunch of borders so it had like this Art Deco design that went around, and I'll put that up on the screen, and I'll put up the animation on the screen as well. This is not going to be a visual heavy presentation. I'll try and make it more auditorily. I'll try and make it more pleasing to the ear, though, by using a more radio voice. Okay, so I'm doing these things with transitions. I'll put the animation up so that you can see them. And transitions are just like animations in a way. I also do some z-axis manipulation. That was another concept that was introduced, which is like in PowerPoint, which is my reference here, is you can send something to the back of a display, or you can bring it forward. So that's the z-axis. A negative z-axis puts it behind other things. It's like if you have several windows open at the same time, they're going to be overlapping, and the order in which they overlap is going to be that z-axis. So negative z-axis sends it to the back, a positive z-axis sends it forward. And okay, I also reviewed fixed elements. So, well, I also reviewed various positioning for elements, such as positioning fixed, positioning relative, and positioning absolute. There's this weird, so positioning fixed, let's just get that out of the way. It's like when you have a HUD display of like, think that you have a helmet or something that's on. So you have something that's in the upper right hand corner in your view, and it doesn't move no matter where you go, it stays there. So it's like stuck on the windshield, and the other elements are going to be behind it. So that's good for like navigation bars and some stuff. I haven't done any projects using fixed elements that it like jumps out like, oh, you would always use it for this. So I don't have a reference for that yet. Then there's the weird thing that's hard to wrap your head around without playing around with it a little bit, is position relative and position absolute. I'm not a tutorial person. I'm a novice. I'm in no place to give advice. I'm not one of these people who's going to blow smoke out my own saying, oh, well, you should do this, and here's a good way to do it. Okay. I'm not a person who's great at explaining this stuff, and I realize that I'm not at the level of capability where I can explain these things verbally. But it's important to know that when you have, and that's part of what this is getting a deeper sense of knowledge by trying to explain the concepts to others. So position relative is, to me, it's like a flag that marks, okay, here is the element that I'm going to reference when I have my absolute elements. And so I use this with my animation. My just very short, simple animation of making the colored borders sink into this box, so to speak, where the positioning of those borders, because I want them to be hidden behind the image element that they are referencing, that positioning, the positioning of that picture that the borders are hiding behind when they are moving. So they get position absolute, which references the ancestor element that is flagged with position relative. And if you don't have anything within the stack of ancestry going back, if you don't have anything in the element lineage going back that has position relative, it will be relative to the body. This should be either the document body or the HTML body. It narrows the scope down by having position relative and position absolute. It's like having a flag and then an element that moves around that flag or is in reference to, like a larger div, or in my case, an image. Well, I have a div that I give an image with the background, so I can do more things with it. Okay. Next, the other thing that I made, and I'll have screen caps up here. The other thing I made is a spoiler button for hide and show. So it's just making a button that it opens up an element and the button stays below it, and then you click it again and it hides the element. A very simple JavaScript function for that, and I'll put up the screen cap for the JavaScript function as well so that you can see that. I'm not going to go through it piece by piece because this is not a tutorial. This is just explaining what did I do today. The next project that I'm going to build off of this in the same vein as having spoilers hidden or shown is a much simpler way where I'm going to use the hover element to have something blurred with opacity, or maybe I'll just have it with the color of the background so that it's illegible. I don't know how to make a blur effect. I'm not going to... See, that's something where you could go down in the weeds of making a blur effect for something. And like, well, how do I do this? And then I'd go out and spend 2 hours trying to around with blur, and then I wouldn't get like another chunk of fundamentals out of the way. But like a real simple thing is having an on hover to change the color of the text, so the text would blend into the background, and it would hide it until you hover over it, or until you hover over a another element, or like I'd have like hover to show spoiler, and I could do it that way as well, so that if it's like a paragraph and I scroll over it, I don't want to reveal the spoiler just scrolling over it. I would want to have an element or a button to the side. Well, that's where it would be a better thing to have like a clickable button for the spoilers, or just even if it's not clicking the button, then clicking the element itself. So there's different ways that you can set things up. And this is something where if you're coding with a team of people, or working with someone who's managing a website, you would have talks like this to discuss, okay, how do you want the spoiler text hidden? Should we use a button, or should we make it so that you have to click the element? And okay, so do you want to blur out the items, or do we want it just to be black barred? And then could we add spacing around it so it looks like CIA stuff with the black lines through it? So you'd have discussions like that. And this is a one-sided conversation, but that kind of conversation is part of development skills, web development skills, and everything. I've been doing a little bit of work with HTML and CSS. And one of these is an epilepsy warning. Yeah, it's 5 and 6. But I've been doing a few different animations with things. I thought it'd be fun to show that off just briefly, so that a couple of my friends that are watching, like, hey, what are you doing with HTML and CSS? Well, I was learning about how to do animations with translating things or rotating to make it look funny or interesting, or be able to hide things so that you see it on mouse over.